This is my path, my journey. I'm willing to explain it all to you guys. No holding back anything. I just hope you're ready for the experience, and I just hope you can handle it.
Okay, so I want to make this deep video. Okay, so this is going to be a deep video about human consciousness and about how. So I've been thinking about this for the past few days. I wanted to make the video yesterday, but I was way too fucking high. I'm a little high now, but like I'm not that high. But that's what sparked the idea originally. So like I was sober throughout the whole day. Like sometimes I'll just be on the go for a hike, do this, do that. Maybe I'll forget the vape pen or, so I don't have my THC on hand or whatever. And I'll just, kind of forget to smoke. I was sitting here watching something. I was like, man, I ain't smoked in fucking forever. So I was like, let's smoke. So then I did a dab. And as soon as anyone who smokes knows that the cannabis can speed up your mind, like THC tends to have your mind race. Now, certain forms of THC don't. Like Delta 8 doesn't do that, but like normal THC does. So like in a few, like just whatever. But like basically, long story short, did a cannabinoid that made my mind race like normal THC, just normal THC. And I was sitting there, kind of got up, did something or whatever, but it reminded me of like why people get cannabis anxiety. Like people get anxiety from cannabis because it makes them overthink and they don't know how to silence their mind. Like they're not in control of their own mind. And it's not like whatever, but I've been practicing meditation for years, went down the psychedelic journey doing psychedelics and like this whole thing. So this whole thing has kind of taught me the whole practice has taught me certain things in life that like now I have control over life because I gained control over my mind during those experiences. Whether it was gaining my control over my mind during meditation experiences, whether it was gaining control over my mind during psychedelic experiences, or whether it was gaining control over my mind during both. But learning how to control my mind and learning how to silence my mind has helped. Now, when I say silence the mind, I mean when I was sitting there smoking, like I smoked, did a dab, went to do shit, I'm like overthinking in my head, but when I overthink, it's about this shit. Like when I overthink, they're these. Like the videos that I have that I make, these are just the thoughts that I think. So like when I sat there and I smoked, I thought all the thoughts that I'm trying to say in this video in that time of me getting up, cleaning, doing this, doing that. And then I silenced my mind because I sat down and I was like, in my head, I thought to myself, man, this is probably why people get anxiety. Because like as I'm thinking in my head, the cannabis made it like speed up even faster. So like you seem like you're slower on the outside when you're high, but on the inside, it's like your mind is going faster, which that's why it can cause anxiety. But for me, I have control over my mind. So what it's thinking about is what I want it to think about. But when it was getting even too fast, I'm like, okay, bro, shut up. And then immediately it shut up. Like a tamed dog. Like you tell it to sit, it sits. It's that. Like all of these people through the internet that have all these practices about the mind, they're all correct. Everybody that talks like Joe Dispenza, who talks about like that situation where it's like, how do you train your mind and how do you get yourself out of these situations? Is you gotta like tell your body to sit, you tell it to fucking sit. It doesn't get up until it's done. You can get your coffee when you're done. You can get you can smoke your weed when you're done. You can do whatever, but you do the work first, which then builds up that self-discipline, which then builds up that muscle, that mental muscle to be able to use the mind, right? Because most people are being used by their mind. They're being used by their consciousness because we don't understand consciousness. We're not taught how to think. We're taught, I hate to say that, but we're not taught how to think. We're taught what to think. We're not taught how to like analyze information or how to learn. We're just taught shit to remember and then regurgitate. Like it's not. There's a difference, because with the human consciousness, right? This kind of gets into this thing I wanted to talk about, because I seen this video on TikTok, okay? And this video was basically had this picture of many different apples, okay? So when I was sitting there overthinking from the cannabis, okay, there was obviously thoughts in my head overthinking. When I told myself to stop, like I'm like, oh man, just shut up, because there was something playing on the TV. I finally sat down for a second, and I was like, oh, let me just look at the TV for a second, and then I was like, okay, shut up, and it was silent. Like I know how to make it silent, so that I'm actually listening to what the people are saying on the TV, or like it's these certain practices have taught me how to listen better to others and how to take in information better. Even the simple practice of I used to listen to Terrence McKenna like 5 hours a day. Like, I don't know, like there would be this practice, I talk about this practice all the time. How like I used to put a dot on the wall, and I learned it from listening to Bob Proctor, but like you put a dot on the wall with like a pencil or a pen or something, and you just stare at the dot. And how long you can stare at the dot will like basically help you tune in your focus, right? But it's not just, it's about learning how to be focused when you need to be focused and unfocused when you need to unfocus, and learning how to control the mind. Like I would do that same practice with a candle. If you light a candle and you practice staring at the candle, and like you train your mind to stare at the candle, and like basically as soon as you look away, it's like game over type shit, and then you restart and you try to refocus your mind on the candle, and when you look away, that's another time when you restart, and eventually your mind starts to get stronger with it. Same thing with meditation. As I was practicing meditation for years, eventually I learned how to not just silence my mind, but in meditation, the goal is to become the observer of your thoughts, so then you can learn how to tame your thoughts, because your human body, because all these spiritual practices are connected. Like everything, everybody's just trying to teach you how to be a better you. That's it. Like everything is just trying to teach you how to control yourself, how to be yourself, how to be the best version of yourself, how to be connected to the universe, how to be connected to the planet, how to be connected to yourself, how to be connected to the internet, how to be connected to other. Like it's all the fucking same. Because if you learn one practice, it's going to help you with another. I learned meditation, learning how to silence my mind so I can try to pull out more information from DMT. Smoking DMT was basically, at one point, DMT was the only psychedelic I had access to. So it was the only way that I had access into this thing. But so then therefore I had to learn how to silence my mind, because it's so damn fast and it's so hard to handle and whatever. But I eventually started doing these practices and doing this stuff and doing the meditation, doing the practice of staring at a dot on the wall, doing the practice of staring at the flame, doing all these different things that then helped me with other situations in life. Just it helped me all around learn how to control my mind, not just for the DMT, not just, to be a more understanding and practice conscious parenting, not just to understand myself or have more self-discipline or know who I am or know my, like, it's all connected. But as I've been like learning how to control my mind, I've learned that consciousness is so misunderstood, because a lot of people don't put the work in, and I'm not trying to be rude. I'm just saying, like, there's a lot of psychologists and neuroscientists and people that study the mind and people that study consciousness that have never even done a psychedelic experience, which makes me like, it's like, man, you really don't even know like how to control your own mind. But like, because there's a difference between, a lot of these people are studying these things so they understand them on like a deep level. They understand like an observer level where they can see, but they don't understand as in like they've never experienced being the observer of their own thoughts. They hear these words of old spiritual meditation practices where they try to tell you to be the observer of your thoughts, but they don't understand how to do it themselves because they haven't put the work in. as I've put the work in on my own spiritual practices through my own spiritual journey, I've been able to learn how to control my own mind. I used to have all these mental health issues. I say it all the time in videos and people probably get annoyed with me saying it, but I want to be fucking clear that it's like I beat the main issues that I had that were in front of my face, like me self-harming, me with anxiety, me with depression, me with not knowing how to control my own mind, me with overthinking, I would overthink so much, I would have anxiety attacks. I would feel like I couldn't fucking breathe, like somebody's sitting on my chest, like, it was bad. But it was all just, I had to put the work in. I couldn't, when I'm faced with those problems, I could have allowed those problems to overcome me. But at that point, that was the point where I had to fight back the most and say, no, I'm going to fight these things. I'm going to fight back my mind with me. And what I mean is, in the psychedelic community, they call it the ego and consciousness. How I had to fight my ego with my own consciousness, with my higher self. The ego is not something you need to kill. It's something you need to punch in the face. Like, you need to punch your own ego in the face enough times where it knows that you are in charge, not it. And it's just there to be your servant. It's complicated, but it's there for a reason. An untamed dog will start to act wild again, like a wolf, right? Like, it's that. We are in a human body, but it's like the human body has its own mind, which is the ego, and then you have your own mind, which is the consciousness. Consciousness is something that we don't understand because we have these terms. We have the subconscious, we have this, but even the subconscious is most likely the subconscious is like programs in a sense that you're running on, where then there's like the ego, which is like the thing that the programs are in, and then there's the consciousness that can insert the programs in and out and observe all of that. I don't know, man, it's so hard to explain all this deep shit, because all this deep shit is connected. What I've seen is all this deep shit is fucking connected. That the meditative practices, they came from the yogi masters, which were most likely using certain psychoactive plants and doing certain things to have psychedelic experiences, or they were pushing themselves spiritually, which then helped them gain knowledge spiritually, helping them gain access to what humans call the Akashic records. But DMT helped me do the same thing. Psychedelics can help you do the same thing, meaning you can gain information that there's no way you would have known. You can gain a knowing that you can't even really explain, but it's a knowing about yourself and about your purpose and about you or whatever, and you can get these epiphanies in a sense from certain heroic doses of psychedelics. And these heroic doses of psychedelics take you away from the ego, as we call it, but what it's doing is it's making it so it's just you and it's just your consciousness. So your consciousness, let's say you smoke DMT. People talk about, I've gotten shot out of my body so many fucking times, it's crazy. And you can fly through a tunnel that looks like this, that's just fluctuating, and you're flying through it, and it's fucking nuts, right? But your physical body's not flying through that thing. Your consciousness is. And as your consciousness is flying through that thing, the farther away it gets from your ego, the more you start to kind of, it can break down. I've had DMT trips where I've gone so far through this thing, it's like you go through the first vortex, then it's like I went through a second tunnel, but the second tunnel reminded me of this DMT trip I heard from Rick Strassman's DMT spirit molecule thing, where this dude was talking about how it was ripping off layers of his humanity as he was going through this thing. But I've gone through something like that, having layers of my human mind being ripped off to the point when then there was just the consciousness itself, without the human construct, without the ideas of human. Like, I couldn't, in that moment, I couldn't have even told you what a human being was, or like what, that wouldn't have made any sense to me. Because my perspective was not that of a human being. Like, as I could feel, as I started going through this thing and things started peeling off of me like a fucking onion, you get to this core version of you that's like this core, pure energy. It's like your energy, your consciousness, your soul. I don't know how to explain it, but the thing that's inside, like, you are in your body, but your consciousness is in your body, and consciousness without the body exists. But humans don't understand, like, we really don't understand what's going on so many different levels, because what needs to happen is a merge between all of this information, because I have been able to merge this information because I don't follow rules. Like, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a real, what humans call a real shaman, I'm not a whatever. I'm just a human being that learned, that loves to learn, and I'm on a journey, and I'm just living. I'm not following rules. I don't care about the society, what the society is doing. I don't care about what the culture's done for thousands of years. I don't care whatever. If what the culture's done for thousands of years helps me and like helps me in my journey, then that's great. But everyone is a different person, and everyone kind of has to learn. Like, in order to think for yourself, you have to kind of be yourself, but you can't think for yourself if you're not yourself. Like, if you know what I mean. Like, I've been able to actually think for myself because I've had many experiences of being the multiple versions of myself. Like, a human being is not just one thing. You know that old saying where they say, if an idea, I think it was the Greeks that said if they had a good idea when they were sober, and if the idea was good when they were intoxicated and the idea was good when they were sober, then it was a good idea. And that's because they understood they needed to look at things from multiple perspectives, because when you take a molecule, it transfers your consciousness into a different perspective, because the human consciousness, sober, quote unquote, is a serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, whatever perspective, meaning we have these molecules that flow through us that allow the soul to experience the human experience. But when the molecules are changed, the soul's experience of reality is changed because the filters change. Like, if you take mushrooms, it removes certain filters that your body has created to create the normal human experience. So, but as physical beings, conscious beings, we can consciously choose to take a molecule that changes our perspective or changes our reality. It changes the molecules that are flowing through us. When you change those molecules, it changes the perspective, because we are the soul. See, that DMT trip I had where it removed all the layers, I've ever since that trip, I'm like, well, that's my core, that's me. Like, that's really me. Everything else is just on top of me. Like a suit on top of a suit, and then ideas on top of ideas, and then this whole thing that then creates this filtered version of you. But then if you remove some of these things, you can become a little more unfiltered, like a little less of the filtered version of you, and you can become as you want to be. Like, that's like something I've realized is like, there's nothing stopping me from being me. Like, when I did psychedelics for the first time when I was 20, I was some wannabe thug because that's what I thought I was. I grew up, I hung out with, these thugs, I thought I was a thug, yada, robbing people, stealing, doing this shit, I gotta get that straight cash, gotta get that, like, that, whatever. But then doing psychedelics, as it removed that construct of wannabe thug, it didn't remove it permanently, but I got to be a consciousness for a second without the idea of black, white, thug, language, life, or whatever. And then when I got back to my human body, sobered down and got sober, from the psychedelic experience, I got to then remember what it was like to not be the thug, to not be the wannabe gangster that's stuck in this yo money blah blah blah, like, because that's what I thought I was. But then those first psychedelic experiences removed that filter and was like, wow, no, that's just a filter that's on top of me, and I can choose to have that filter there if I want it to be, or I can choose not to. Now, this I went on this whole long rant because I wanted to try to explain all of this, then to explain this. I seen this TikTok video, and this TikTok video was explaining so they had a picture of an apple, and there was like maybe like 7 pictures of an apple, and there was one that was extremely hyper realistic, and then there was one that was almost like cartoon like, but not as hyper realistic as this, but still kind of bright. And then there was that one, but less bright, less vivid, and so forth and so on, and it got more faded. The apple started getting less faded. There was one apple that was like a black and white apple, and then there was nothing. And basically it was saying like, when somebody says picture a red apple, what do you see? And it was saying there was just people in the chat that people thought they were trolling, but I know that this is a real thing. Like, this is a real I don't like the word disease, but it's a real condition that I think it's called aphantasia or something like that. But I might be wrong with that, but it's close. Because basically what it is if somebody says picture a red apple, they can't picture a red apple. And then the person who made the post said that they see the hyper realistic one. Some people said they see nothing, and then through the whole thing, there was everybody seen in between. Like, everyone had a different version of what they see. Some seen hyper realistic, some seen almost the cartoon one, but like not as vivid as the hyper realistic one, but still like kind of vivid. Another one seen, I think there was one person that seen in black and white, and maybe that might because they were old, but I see in the middle. Like, so the way I think and how deep or whatever, I thought I was going to see or whatever, but when I really started paying attention, because I was like, let me just really, whatever, I seen going towards, like, it's not as vivid as some of the people described or whatever for me. It's not that I don't see nothing, and it's not that I see in black and white, and it's just the apple is there, it's just faded. But I know it's there. I can see it, I can imagine it. I can, if somebody says imagine a red car, I can imagine the red car. I can imagine myself hopping in the car. I can imagine, like, or whatever. And some people can't do that, and it's not a good or bad thing, because, like, I'm in the middle of being able to see the thing. So it's like, even there's some people that see hyper realistic, it's like, I can't even imagine that. I don't see that. I don't imagine that way. But what I'm trying to get to is that human consciousness is not human beings. Okay, the physical body is not the only thing that the genes transfer. The physical traits are not the only traits that are transferring. And the human being itself is getting smarter as we have more babies and more people mix together on the planet. The genes get to mix together, and as the genes get to mix together, you get to have the best of both worlds type shit. Like, if one person is missing this, or like, if one person can see hyper realistic and another person has a different type of mind, or maybe like a math type of mind, because they say Albert Einstein's mind was actually different. And this is what made me think about all this, which is like, if Albert Einstein's mind is actually different, then like the part that helped him with math and shit, like, that was actually bigger, I think they said. So then it made me put into question that everyone is like that in their own way. Like, every mind is not the same. Like, they are, but they're not. Like, human consciousness is evolving as the mind is evolving, but human consciousness is also evolving. Not just the physical brain, but the ability to imagine is getting stronger, is getting better. The because I think that, the human body is a machine, and getting as it's mixing genes, as it's whatever, we're getting smart. Like, we're not Neanderthals anymore. Neanderthals, I bet, couldn't imagine as well as we can, and I bet that is why they didn't have the technological evolutions that we have had, or the whatever that we have had, because the reason why we are able to have these technological evolutions, we have ideas. Somebody had an idea of a chair before it was ever real. Somebody had the idea of a computer before it was ever real. Somebody had the idea of a speaker before it was ever real. The idea of a microphone. Like, all these were in somebody's imagination first. They were not in the imagination of Neanderthals. No, they were in the imagination of Homo sapiens. And as the human species evolves, we're probably going to evolve from Homo sapien into something, like, we're going to keep going. But maybe we're going to stay Homo sapien for a while, and then instead of going from, like, we went from Homo erectus to Homo sapien, maybe instead of going from Homo sapien to something else, we're just going to kind of use technology and the evolution of consciousness itself, and then human beings will become this version of themselves that they almost can't even imagine. Because I believe the future of humans is psychedelics. I believe the future of humans is technology. I believe the future of humans is consciousness. I believe the future of humans is living conscious, like being conscious beings. And I think the future of humans is a spiritual evolution. We are going to have a spiritual evolution on the planet as humans start to get more connected to their own imagination, because that imagination, like, it gets in the question, what is the imagination, right? What are we getting a glimpse of? Because when you picture a red apple, it's not like you can dissect your brain to find the red apple. Where is that red apple? We're tapping into something that we don't understand. And as human consciousness evolves, as we start doing psychedelics more, as we start getting into, like, true, like, consciousness study, because you can't study consciousness without psychedelics. I know there's going to be a lot of neuroscientists and people that study the brain or whatever that disagree, but I'm telling you, I didn't even finish high school, but I got the way that I am by putting the work in. I wanted to learn, I wanted to get educated, I wanted to get smart, but also psychedelics and plants and herbs. Certain things have helped me along the journey, like plants, like lion's mane mushroom extract has helped me because it helps me retain information, it helps me remember better, it helps me just have a clearer mind, because sometimes psychedelics can leave the mind a little traumatized, or like it can just put your mind in a stressful state. And that's why you have to really, the meditation, the other practices, the mindfulness practices, the just taking care of yourself, eating right, being healthy, being in good shape, it's all connected to, like, being the best version of you. All of these spiritual practices, the psychedelics, the meditations, the scientific discoveries, then quantum mechanics, and all this other stuff that's like, all this shit is all connected, and it's going to help us become better versions of us as a whole. Like, because right now we're arguing over small little things, or because our consciousness is too small. Like, I still think we're cavemen. We're like cavemen. And the only reason I'm able to look at this like this is because I've had so many psychedelic experiences that have put me out of my monkey body. Like, I've been able to think outside of the body, and then therefore I've been able to think without the limitations of the body. And so it's helped me a lot. Like, that's why I'm a huge advocate for psychedelics, but I'm a huge advocate for intelligence. Don't be fucking stupid, right? Don't be an idiot. Get educated. Make sure you test your substances, especially if they're molecules and not plants. Make sure, like, you know what you're getting into. Know a little, like, before people do psychedelics, I generally suggest people do research on shamanism, on psychedelic history, on ayahuasca history, mushroom history, mescaline history, peyote history, the whole rituals, the whole thing, that just, and then maybe also get educated on the scientific discoveries. What receptor does that molecule attach to? How does that psychedelic work? What is it doing to your body? Is it physically safe? Is it like, what's the LD50? And like all these shits, that all this knowledge has helped me so much be able to be a better version of me. But it's all consciousness, like all of it. It was my consciousness that had to first think about, well, I want to learn this. So then I had to have the self-discipline to then learn that thing, or the self-discipline to do the meditation practices. I had to have the self-discipline and the balls to do the psychedelics and to face my own consciousness. Because the way you understand consciousness is not by looking at human consciousness as a whole. It's by just looking at your own individual consciousness and understanding that thing as a whole. And I think human beings will go 100 times further if we flip the switch. Instead of scientifically looking at consciousness, we actually go and investigate consciousness on a exploring type level. Like, go explore consciousness. We need people, like, I don't know if the government would ever do this shit, but we need the government to give grants to scientists to have people who are dedicated to just traveling the psychedelics and understanding them. Now, there is this whole thing about the MK Ultra and how they might have already tried that, but they did it for the wrong intentions. But if somebody did that with pure good intentions to truly just understand human consciousness and try to understand reality as a whole, we would understand reality as a whole, like that. Like, but the reason we're not dedicated to actually trying to understand consciousness, they're still looking at it from a primitive way, because they're looking at it from fear. Like, we're so scared of the unknown, and scientists are scared to dip their toes into psychedelics, like on a real way. Like, there are real hardcore psychedelic scientists that still will sit there and say on camera, the psychedelics, they might not be real. The entities, they might not be real, so you just never know. And it's that thing that it's like, I don't know if they're just saying that to keep their license as a scientist, or if they're saying that because they haven't communicated with the entities enough to understand that there's no way that that's them, or haven't had enough conversations with humans enough to see that there are other humans that are also communicating with entities from psychedelics. And it's weird, but that happens. The vortex, the other dimensions, the city of light in DMT space, the mother ayahuasca, all these things that happen with psychedelics. It's not just about what people talk about. It's not about the entities. It's not about mother ayahuasca. It's not about whatever. It's about what that does to somebody after they realize that they can that they're conscious, that they're aware in an experience where they're not even in their own physical meat machine anymore. And it really enforces that you are your consciousness and not your body. Like, in a way that that science can't really explain, or in a way that you can't explain, because it's why people say, when they say, I did DMT and it was more real than this world, what they mean is that they did DMT and it was more there than here. Like, here, you're a soul inside of a body. There, you're the soul being the observer. So you're more you as the soul. Like, you're more you without the filters than you are with the filters, but because we're in the meat machine and we're born into the meat machine, we think we are the meat machine. And when you have an experience that completely takes you out of your body, like a high dose of DMT, you come back and be like, well, that was more real than this world, because you'll probably be a soul for a much longer period of time than you'll be a physical being. Like, you're probably without a meat machine longer than you are with a meat machine type shit, like on the scale of the universe type thing. And like, there's things that the human meat machine doesn't understand because the soul can't bring all the information into the physical. The physical can't be downloaded with everything when you're born. You are born, and then human beings have the opportunity to pull in and gain more information as they experience the human experience. They can experience different molecules and different things. Just like Timothy Leary said, in the future, it's not going to be about what book you read, it's going to be about what molecule you took to expand and retract your consciousness. He understood, but the people that understand, it's so hard to explain what the fuck we understand. Like, he understood that in the future, because he learned information that he couldn't necessarily explain, even though he was doing a good job, tune in, turn on, drop out, yada yada. But like, there's still so much that he knew that he just couldn't say to us. There's so much that I know that there's no way I could say it in English, but it's because I've experienced it on many, many, many occasions. And when you've had the experience of being conscious without a body and going through something, and just like you were born on planet Earth and then you're going through something right now and then you're gonna die. Like, I did DMT and it was like going through something, like just going through the human experience just from a higher different perspective, higher dimensional perspective, and then you go through that something and then the DMT trip is over and you kind of wake up. Almost like smoke the DMT, it starts the life in DMT, DMT trip ends, it's like the death of the DMT, and it fades away and you go away and you come back here. But that's because these molecules like DMT or whatever, they only last so long. Smoke it only lasts 5-10 minutes. You do ayahuasca, it lasts 3 to 6 hours, right? You can be in there longer. You do mushrooms, you could be in there longer, because mushrooms and ayahuasca and DMT, to me, in my opinion, I think they all take you to the same type world, the same type place, just slightly different perspectives. Just like planet Earth, you can be in a big city, you can be in New York City or Dubai. They're two cities, but two different experiences, even though they're both cities on planet Earth. The human consciousness is one of the most misunderstood things that exists, and we're never going to fully understand it until we start having the balls to dive into it and like just fully look at it. Like, because it reminds me of the psychedelic experience. The psychedelic experience, you can pull in information. The hardest part about it is being able to look at it. It's like Medusa. That shit will turn you to stone. Like, because you'll just be sitting there like totally like in awe if you don't know how to control your mind, control yourself, pay attention, all this shit, like, and then you can kind of start to see what's going on. And human consciousness, we're gonna start getting into human consciousness as we start getting more into psychedelics, as ayahuasca is making a comeback, mushrooms are making a comeback, MDMA is making a comeback, LSD is making a comeback, and they're making a comeback scientifically, which then once we make them have a comeback scientifically, there are some cities that have decriminalized mushrooms or decriminalized psychedelics. That's the beginning stages. And as we get to this thing, we're going to see, maybe before I die, right? I might be able to see mushrooms be legal, or decriminalized at least. We might be able to see these things being used more popularly, because in the beginning it's going to be used for like mental health issues, therapy, things like that. But when more humans start doing psychedelics, you're going to see why we even need therapy in the first place as a whole. Like, people will start to see what the real problem is, and then we'll fix it. Because we don't see what the real problem is, because we're only trying to fix symptoms. We're not trying to fix the root cause, the root problem, which is the human species is disconnected from itself and what's actually going on.